Apologize. I yield back.
Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director, for being here. Let's talk about that contempt for the rule of law. You know, Americans are willing to accept outcomes that they don't agree with. In contrast to your answer to Mr. Elsie, what they are not willing to accept, what I am not willing to accept, what the American people are not willing to tolerate, and what I am not willing to tolerate are when outcomes are influenced by actions of your agents. They are outraged, and so am I. So let's talk about FISA. In FISA Section 702, at the Senate Intelligence Committee's Worldwide Threats hearing in March, you noted that warrantless searches of Americans' communications in Section 702 data are down 93% year over year. FBI officials told the New York Times that the number is around 204,000 searches per year, compared to as many as 3.4 million in 2021. So let me ask you, did our national security threats drop 93%? Or had the FBI been conducting millions of unnecessary warrantless searches of Americans' private communications?
Well, so first I would disagree with you that what was described in the report were warrantless searches of Americans' communications. 702 is a tool that is fully consistent with the Fourth Amendment, and the report in question does not find that the searches, the queries, were in violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that.
Else. So, but as to the other part of your question, the biggest chunk of the number of query terms, and again, each of these query terms are not individual people, but for instance, for one person, multiple email addresses or something like that, were from helping to identify victims of cyber attacks. In particular, that year, an awful lot of the cyber attacks were coming from the Russians, but in some cases it would be the Chinese. And I think the safeguards, the procedures that we've built in have all led to a more surgical use of the authorities that we have, not necessarily eliminating queries that themselves were violative of any rules. But it does mean that the effect of all of the changes that we've put in place, I think, has brought, again, a more surgical approach to how our people run queries. And I think it's important for people to understand that these queries are running queries through information that is already lawfully collected. It's not unlike, everybody can relate to this, if you have your email inbox.
That's exactly what I want to talk to you about.
And you run a query to find out all emails from Congressman CLINE, for example.
Okay, former NSA General Counsel Gerstle has been telling the press that the FBI can only do this. There's some foreign connection involved in the investigation, not just for some routine domestic crime. But when asked for clarification, the FBI released a statement saying that generally there must be some nexus to a foreign power or from some factual connection to international terrorism, espionage, or foreign computer intrusions for the FBI to run these searches for evidence of a crime. But the FBI's querying guidance that you released this week doesn't include this requirement. The guidance says that queries related in investigations related to crimes with a nexus to a foreign power or target of FISA collection or crimes that have a factual connection to international terrorism, espionage, or foreign computer intrusions are examples of situations that will tend to qualify. But nowhere does it say that such connections are required for these queries. Can you confirm that the FBI does not require analysts to have evidence of a nexus to a foreign power or foreign crime before searching Section 702 data for Americans' communications?
I think I would have to get... Sorry, microphone. I think I would have to, in order to give you a comprehensive answer to that question, I would have to have our subject matter experts and lawyers follow back up with you, because I want to be, its precision here is very important. And I don't have the guidance in front of me, but I want to make sure that we give you the complete answer to your question. So I'm happy to follow up with you.
Well, don't you think that they should? And shouldn't Congress codify that nexus? That nexus requirement for these searches in order to protect Americans' Fourth Amendment rights?
I'm not going to get into individual legislative fixes here. I'm going to work with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the rest of the intelligence community and the Justice Department and with the Congress on potential adjustments, if any, to 702.
I'm also on judiciary, so I look forward to that.
Okay.
I yield back.
Thank you.
Mr. Aderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, good to have you here today, Mr. Director.
I appreciate the FBI's efforts in addressing illicit activity in the U.S. and the increased emphasis on the adversary's intelligence threat against the United States, namely China. That said, the Department of Justice and the FBI continue to fall short in mitigating our adversary's intelligence threat. In 2019, for example, the FBI estimated that the United States incurs annual losses ranging from $225 to $600 billion annually in illicit activities by China. To put that in perspective, according to the President's budget, all across all agencies, the U.S. invested $142 billion in research and development. So if you look at those numbers, in 2019, China stole at least twice the amount of money we spent on federal research and development. So in looking at your FY24 budget request increase, the counterintelligence budget is increased by $4.5 million. But at the same time, the Bureau requested $14.1 million for zero-emission vehicles. And while I applaud your incredible efforts in addressing the Chinese threat, I guess really what many of us are having a hard time is reconciling these priorities when China steals our entire research and development budget annually. So understanding this is an unclassified environment that we're in this afternoon, can you share your priorities to address these Chinese espionage threats?
So I guess I want to start off by being crystal clear that, as I've said consistently for years now, that in my view there is no country that presents a more significant threat to our innovation, our ideas, our economic security, our national security than the Chinese government. And that's why we've grown the number of investigations into threats from China about 1,300%. And it wasn't that long ago when I checked, and we were opening a new investigation related to the Chinese government about every 12 hours. So our folks are working hard on the threat, and that is, for me, at the top of the list. I'm talking about with my people every single day. The budget request, there's a little bit of apple to orange there. We have hundreds of millions of dollars in counterintelligence initiatives, and of course the lion's share of those are focused on China. And as far as the increase, the enhancement, the 4.5 million number that you referenced comes on the heels of last year, which we're very grateful to this subcommittee for, an increase of 34 million and 88 positions. So it's part of a multi-year growth by us. The zero emissions vehicle thing is simply the FBI following an executive order that's been applied to every federal agency. So we had to have that in our budget, but you can be confident that any resources that the Congress sees willing to send our way to fight the Chinese government threat, we will put to good use. Our folks are opening, when I say they're opening an investigation, or at least they were last time I checked, about every 12 hours, it sure as heck ain't because they don't have something else to do with their time. Sure. As we've discussed here with all the other threats we're facing. So we are working very hard with it, but the reality is if there's one thing the Chinese government can bring to the table, it's scale. And then there's a second thing they can bring to the table, it's centralized control. So you put scale and centralized control together, and it's a significant challenge for everybody in the intelligence community. For us, the key to fighting back is partnerships. It's partnerships with the other agencies in the intelligence community, with our foreign partners, our allies, with the business community, because an awful lot of what the Chinese are trying to steal is in the hands of the business community. With academia, they're trying to steal our research, so working with universities. And so the way for us to meet them on the playing field, if you will, is through partnerships. And that's been a big part of our focus because we're not single-handedly going to be able to investigate our way out of this particular threat. As I mentioned in my opening statement, on the cyber side, the Chinese government even if all of our cyber personnel did nothing but China, and of course there's a lot else in the cyber world besides just China, the Chinese government hackers would outnumber us 50-1. So it's a significant asymmetric, I think to use the word that was used before, issue. But we are growing, and I wouldn't read too much into the difference between the 4.5 versus the 14.1. The 14.1 is simply us implementing an executive order that we, like every agency, are required to.
Well, certainly I know your commitment, but I do want to stress the importance of that, of really doing everything we can to protect our investments, and I yield back.
Mr.